you just quickly talking about the alchemy principle that we were talking about this morning. Of these two systems, have you achieved what we're calling alchemy, or the multiplication of elements within the water in either one of these or both?
In these two systems, we do. That system, I don't want that to happen. I don't want minerals or elements to multiply because there's no real way for them to get out. This system is a standalone system. I have systems like that have been running for years.
So we'll want to talk about when you don't want it, what to do to prevent it.
Right. Well, what you do to prevent it is use distilled water and sodium hydroxide. And a few little catalysts. You can buy my electric water, throw that in there. That can eliminate what we call CO2 soaking. CO2 soaking is when your hydrogen device runs down and the plates are covered with a CO2 layer, and you start to see a black film developing. Or sometimes there are other colors, and that actually starts to reduce your efficiency. By using the electric water and some of the catalysts that we've created with using the gold and the platinum and such, you completely eliminate CO2 soaking. This unit runs better after 6 months than it does when it's brand new. Okay, because it runs better the longer it goes. Unlike most systems which suffer from CO2 soaking and a couple of other ailments that start to clog up their plates. So that's what you use frequencies for usually, is to strip that off. But I don't like the use of frequencies so much as I like the use of catalysts.
So that for a very simple system with very minimal catalyst or maintenance, that's quite a remarkable system.
The catalyst never really wears out because we have the reservoirs that feed the catalyst back to the machine. Okay, so the catalyst never really wears out. The catalyst is always being recycled.
How often are you measuring the ratio or the concentration?
Once I put it in there, I don't usually. It doesn't really change.
So,
well, that's one thing that I will talk about when we start multiplying the minerals, is that when you use heavy acids or heavy alkalis, that for some reason that actually inhibits the process of multiplication and what we want to do over here. So we'll get into that a little bit more.
And by the way, if other people in the audience have questions that you want to ask, you think ought to be brought up at any point, feel free.
So like I said, this is the system. This is a basic system, and this type of system can run for incredible amounts of time. I put them on semi-trucks. I put them on oil wells. I put them on standalone generators, that type of thing, because they're bomb-proof and they're very, very sturdy. So I like this is what we call, this is a dry cell. You'll see is a wet cell, and this is a hybrid. It's got plates that are pressed together with a spacer in between, and so there's not a lot of room for water to get, or there's not a lot of ease of communication for water in there, but it slowly seeps and fills up all the cells. So that's kind of a hybrid system. It's lined with Teflon inside there to make certain that it's very, very heat resistant. Oh, there's one thing I really want to stress. If you're building a hydrogen device, hydrogen boils at 210 degrees, or water boils at 210 degrees. Inside of a hydrogen device, water boils at 140 degrees. Okay? It's a completely different environment inside there. So if your device is running hotter than 140, 150 degrees, you're actually boiling water and creating steam, and that's very dangerous, especially for an engine. Not so dangerous for a torch, that's okay, but for an engine, that's really bad. So be aware of that. That's why these also serve as safety systems to keep any steam from getting into the engine. So that's a little preparatory part. Remember, 2.35 volts per cell, 1/4 amp per square inch, and that is a pretty good round number to remember as you're building your devices.
Where'd you come up with those numbers?
Those those I studied a long time with Bob Boyce, and I read a huge amount by George Wiseman and Ewell Brown, and those were the numbers that I found fit the criteria the best. And they've proven out over and over again. If you go over current, you'll crystallize your plates and stop producing gas. You may get a lot of gas, it won't be great gas, and over time the plates will stop producing. So your efficiency on your hydrogen device will go down. If you go over voltage, your plates will start falling apart.
Okay.
Oh, we bought so many devices. We bought round devices, and my family and I, and we played with a lot of different devices, and we found every single which way to fail. I mean, we got a tube device. They were using baking soda as the catalyst. We ran that thing like they said we could, but at a peak output, we ran it for about 4 or 5, maybe a week, but I think it was about 4 or 5 days. Pulled that thing apart, it fell in half because the plates had just eaten themselves to death. Baking soda, not a good way to go. In my opinion, I don't know anybody else. Maybe somebody else has a fantastic experience with it, but the long term, in harsh conditions, this seems to be the best way to go. Moving right along, one of my fields of research is health and longevity, as we've already mentioned with the different waters that my family and I have created. And so I wanted to find a way to deliver beneficial elements and such to the body more quickly and effectively. And I turned to my hydrogen research because Ewell Brown, when he was doing his work, he could send divers down, supplied with a supply of Brown's gas. He could send divers down twice as deep and come up 2 or 3 times as fast as a regular diver, because the hydrogen and oxygen was going into the cells. The oxygen was giving the needed oxygen to the tissues, and then the oxygen and hydrogen was recombining as water and not producing any toxic gases in the body, so they could come up faster without any bends. So, and then there were several gentlemen, as a matter of fact, some of the people here have actually done work with healing and curing of chronic disease, or working with at least relieving chronic diseases using Brown's gas. And I'd read many of these accounts, and so I was very, very excited. So I studied and created a device that allows me to use no sodium hydroxide at all, and instead use just either the etheric elements or the ormus elements that I work with, and breathe those substances. And that's what this turned out to be. And you put water in with a little reservoir. The gas comes out, and you can breathe that directly. And excuse me, oh boy, howdy, it's good stuff. Gets rid of headaches. There's talk of actually people putting plastic bags over sprained wrists and such, and healing the injuries, even stroke victims. So there's a lot of we could go pretty deep into that, but we don't. This is not the forum. But what I noticed was when I added an alchemical fluid to this system right here, the alchemical fluid that was very, very difficult to make and took a long time to produce, suddenly was multiplying. It got thicker and darker in the reservoir. I said, wait a minute, that shouldn't be happening. I've worked for years to try and figure out a faster way to make this. So and when I analyzed it, I realized, oh look, it's actually concentrating. It's actually more concentrated than when I started. So at that point, I remembered some experiments that were done and realized that it's possible that I was actually multiplying chemical compounds and multiplying elements. So should I tell that story, or should we just go? Let's just go on with this here.
Yeah, they can go to part 1 because we talked about that in part 1, didn't we?
Yes, that's right, we did.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Okay.
Okay, so let me show you what I did here. Now, what you actually see here is a violation of the rules that I already laid down, but that's because we're not using sodium hydroxide. We're using less plates, and we actually end up giving it a little bit more. Voltage. What you see here is a conventional. I know it's very dirty, but that's good elements that you see in there. I drained out most of it. You can see some of the red stuff down there. excuse me, this was all completely clear when I started, and it's a system that uses no sodium hydroxide because, as I said, sodium hydroxide interferes with the process. And I know people seeing the video are saying, well, look at that red stuff, he's disintegrating plates. I'm not disintegrating plates. I have measured all of these things with micrometers, and I'm not disintegrating the plates at all. I'm actually multiplying and dropping out elements. And so what you see here is essentially this system, a little bit different voltage current ratios. This is my first system that I ran off of a solar panel. Literally, what you're seeing here, this device generates about 20 liters an hour using, is my solar panel in here?
20 liters of hydrogen an hour?
20 liters of hydrogen an hour using only a little $45 solar panel from Harbor Freight. Okay?
How many square feet is it?
Probably about 4.5, 5.
Okay.
4.5, 5 square feet. It's not even their big, powerful one. This is just an experiment I did, and that I haven't measured the output from when I hooked it up to the big panels, but the little solar panel is generating about 20 liters an hour, so about a third of a liter a minute. And so we have a fuel that we can use to cook our food, heat our houses. It's being generated by the sun, and at the same time, it's creating a byproduct of an actual sellable element of gold and platinum and stuff like that. So that's the basics of it. Now, what you have to do, you can't see it in there very well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this here. Essentially, you put together a set of stainless steel plates with spacers. Here I use an O-ring, or actually it's a quad ring. It gives me twice as much surface area of contact than an O-ring, but that's another story. Here I use an O-ring. In here, I use a strip here and a strip here and allow free communication of water down and up, so that way the minerals and elements that are multiplied can fall down, and the gas from the hydrogen and oxygen gas can rise. And so it's completely unobstructed. In this system, it's contained so that, of course, it doesn't leak and the gas comes out the top. So that's basically what I have inside there.
It's like a wet cell.
What's that?
Like a wet cell.
It is a wet cell. This is what is considered a wet cell system. We're not looking for high efficiency.
Could you point out in here, you said there's basically along each side. Could you point out where those are? It looks like you have little spacers right about there and right about there.
Yeah, there's some spacers right about there. And once again, I violated the rules. I didn't go an 1/8 inch of spacing. I literally just used I'm so ashamed. I used zip ties. I cut zip ties and used those as spacers because they're a little bit less than a 1/16 of an inch. See, in this system, we're putting our energy into making the elements, and we're not concerned about super high efficiency like with my hydrogen device. So we can play with some of the variables.
And also, you want to play with more heat as you
What's
have
that?
less neutrals.
Say again?
You want to play with more heat as you have less neutrals.
Yes, I have less neutrals. So as he said, more heat is generated, and more there's a little bit different current ratio. So in this one, here's the numbers. I've got a positive and a negative plate, and 1, 2, 3, 4 neutrals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells. 5 cells on each side, so for a total of 10 cells. And I run about 16 volts for 3 amps maximum into here with a power supply. And what that does is that drops out such a huge amount of elements. Like I said, all the water was completely clear when I started, and the plates are not disintegrating. I take this apart routinely, and every month, every couple weeks or so, measure the plates. I'm not disintegrating the plates. I'm actually dropping out elements out of the water. There are elements to multiply because there's no real way for them to get out. This system is a standalone system. I have systems like that have been running for years.
So we'll want to talk about when you don't want it, what to do to prevent it.
Right. Well, what you do to prevent it is use distilled water and sodium hydroxide. And a few little catalysts. You can buy my electric water, throw that in there. That can eliminate what we, much as I like the use of catalysts. So
And so that for a very simple system with very minimal catalyst or maintenance, that's quite a remarkable
well,
system.
the catalyst never really wears out because we have the reservoirs that feed the catalyst back to the machine. Okay, so the catalyst never really wears out. The catalyst is always being recycled.
How often are you just quickly talking about the alchemy principle that we were talking about this morning? Of these two systems, have you achieved what we're calling alchemy or the multiplication of elements within the water in either one of these or both?
In these two systems, we do. That system, I don't want that to happen. I don't want minerals called CO2 soaking. CO2 soaking is when your hydrogen device runs down and the plates are covered with a CO2 layer, and you start to see a black film developing. Or sometimes there are other colors, and that actually starts to reduce your efficiency. By using the electric water and some of the catalysts that we've created with using the gold and the platinum and such, you completely eliminate CO2 soaking. This unit runs better after 6 months than it does when it's brand new. Okay, because it runs better the longer it goes. Unlike most systems which suffer from CO2 soaking and a couple of other ailments that start to clog up their plates. So that's what you use frequencies for usually, is to strip that off. But I don't like the use of frequencies so much.